Well, the topic really is a very broad and very important one.
Revelation. Okay.
And that is, not revelation is a specific or one aspect of the discussion, but primarily we're going to talk about the accuracy, the historicity, the proofs of the Torah. Because this is an area which is obviously very crucial for us Jews. You know, the Torah is the bedrock of our religion, of course. We read it in every synagogue. We revere it. This is the fabric of our nation. And a lot of people have a lot of mixed feelings about it. There's a lot of mitzvahs that we know, but most of us, I don't know, maybe most of us, a lot of us have read the entire book. Some of us maybe haven't finished the entire book. And what the Jewish people have been claiming for all these years, or the Jewish philosophical mainstream stance for the past couple of millennia, since Moses, for about 3,000 years, has been that the book, Torah, not the entire Bible, the 5 books of the Torah, are written by Moses, this fellow by the name of Moses, and it was dictated to him by God. So Moses is a prophet. The definition of a prophet is someone who is able to be a receptacle of God's communication. Varying levels of prophecy, but Moses is the epitome or the apex of the he's on the Mount Rushmore all alone of prophets, and God dictates to Moses what word to write. So the first word of the Torah is Bereshit. God says, okay, I want you to write Bereshit. Fantastic, you wrote Bereshit. Let's go to the next word, Bara, and that continuing from the beginning of the Torah all the way to the end of the 304,805 letters, over 5,845 verses. Right? That's what the Jewish people have claimed. That is what Maimonides writes as being one of the fundamental principles of the Torah, that Jews have to believe that this Torah was written by Moses as per the dictation of God many thousands of years ago, and that was delivered to the Jewish people. As to the status of the last 8 verses, that is the only verses that are in question as to who is the author. The 8 verses at the end of the Torah, all the way at the end of Deuteronomy, discuss the death of Moses. Moses died. So the question is, did Moses write it before he died as a prophecy? Just like many parts of the Torah, is not only non-linear, doesn't follow chronological order, but the Torah foretells things that happen in the future. Right? The Torah makes predictions, and hopefully we'll see some of the predictions today. Was the last 8 verses written by Moses foretelling his own demise? That's one opinion of the Talmud. Was written by Joshua? That's a second opinion. Either way, those are the only verses that are in question. The rest of the 5,830, I guess there would be 38 verses, or 37 verses, were, according to the Jewish tradition, written by Moses as per the dictation of God. So now it's important. There's the prophecies written by Joshua, by Solomon, by David, by Ezekiel, etc. And those were prophets, and we accept those words as being the word of God, so to speak, but not word for word. More like the idea. God says, like, hey, I want you to write so-and-so or communicate this to the Jewish people, and you write it. It has a filter, and that filter is the prophet. They have to put their own input and their own flair and style into writing it. Moses, or the Torah, and the way the Jewish people have always understood the Torah is that Moses didn't input anything. God told Moses, you write this, and he just wrote it. He is just a direct channel between the Almighty and the Jewish people. So that's number one. Now, the ramifications of this is very important. This is why the discussion is a very, very important one. Because for us Jews, our entire nation, our entire religion, everything that we've been living and practicing for thousands of years is all based on that first assumption. We eat matzah on Passover, and we fast on Yom Kippur, and we wear mezuzah. We have mezuzahs on our doors, and we wear tefillin, and we pray. All that is based on that one assumption. All the mitzvahs that we do, all the Jewish teachings that we impart onto our children, all the bar mitzvah studies that we do, the kids should learn from the Torah, all the investment that we do in Jewish charities, the support of Israel, all that is based upon the fact that we're the Jewish people, we're unique because of the Torah. These stories are real, and they are vibrant and active today. It has a lasting effect because the Torah is still active as we speak. That's the ramifications if it's true. If it's not true, if it's false, or if it was fabricated, it was a hoax, Moses was a charlatan, it was written by someone else. Any way that the Torah is not true, the way it's described itself to be true, is written by Moses as per the dictation of God, either written by someone else or the stories never happened, there were no miracles, the whole thing in Egypt never happened, none of the miracles at Sinai happened, none of the 10 plagues happened, all that was made up, and we'll have to examine the evidence. But if that indeed was so, then it's important for us to realize that we're living a lie, collectively. And we have been, and our grandparents have been, and all that they gave up, and all the marginalizations, and all the pogroms, and all the inquisitions, and all the Holocaust, and all that was because we were steadfastly supporting and adhering to fabrication and a hoax and a lie. Everything. All the collective history of Jewish people was based upon an entire fallacy. So that's why on both sides of the equation, there's a lot of gravity. And for us personally, it could be very unsettling, very uneasy. Like this could be this. I think if we're going to do this discussion the proper way, most people here will be agitated. I hope, because the information is not just some idea that's out there, and it is an idea that's out there. But for all of us, we have to take this idea and bring it within ourselves. We have to ask ourselves, okay, what is the evidence? And therefore, what does it mean?
Do you feel that, I feel that most of the Jews in this country do not consider charity and being good and supporting Israel because of Torah? I mean, they're not thinking
okay.
Of Torah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That there's a lot, and a lot of
thing on their mind.
That's true. That's true.
Well, that's
but
most Jews don't even know the Torah.
Most people don't ever have this hour-long conversation that we're going to have in their lives. They never ever examine the evidence one way or the other. But it's a very important discussion because this, the conclusion that we will draw, that we could draw, or at least the dialogue that we're going to have here, is probably the most important, one item of information that we'll ever have to choose in our lives.
And isn't there a way of looking at it that it's not black or white, that even if it's not literally true in every single aspect of it, that it's still a worthy way of living your life?
That is the preferred answer for all of us.
Yes,
we all would prefer that to be true. However, so let me reference an idea here. This is what the Talmud says, just to underscore what the traditional perspective has always been. Talmud says everyone has believed that the entire Torah, both written and oral, are true. Everyone has believed it. If someone doesn't believe it, they have no portion on the Jewish people. Talmud is very, very strong about this particular point. You have to believe it in its entirety. How much so? How much? To what degree do we have to believe into the accuracy, authenticity, historicity, veracity of the Torah? If someone says, this is a direct quote from the Talmud, it's in Sanhedrin, I believe it's 99a, 98a, 100a, one in that area I can find it exactly if you're interested. If someone says, all the verses in the Torah are true, besides for one, there's one verse in the numbers, Leviticus, and Genesis, doesn't matter. One verse that's not true. He's got no portion of the world to come. That's it. It takes a stance that, so yes, we'd all prefer to have this, quasi hybrid. Yeah, it's inspired, it's true, whatever, but not everything. We would like that because that would kind of obviate us from any serious commitment. That's obviously the preferred response that we would. That's what we would all wish kind of was true, because that would give us kind of more flexibility. But the Talmud goes out on a limb and says like this. It says, if it's true, or the perspective that they have, and it's a traditional Jewish perspective, whereas everything's true, every single verse. And not only that, it adds more. It says in the oral Torah, everything is true, and even every Talmudic syllogism, every proof that's brought out, there's thousands of those are all true, and those are from Moses. So that doesn't seem to open the door for this other perspective. Now, what it does do, and this is also important if we're going to have a serious, legitimate, logical discussion about this, it also provides for the option of it being very easily refuted. Because it's very easy to refute the Torah. Why is that? all you have to do is refute one verse. The second we know that one verse is not true, if we could prove that theoretically, well, but then the entire narrative, means the options are either it's all true, or if it's not all true, then it doesn't matter. Because the second one part of it's fabricated, well, then maybe everything's fabricated. Once we see a hole in the argument of one side of the issue, then the entire argument collapses. But conversely, the second we could prove, if we're able to, in a fair and genuine way, if we could prove that one story is divine or supernatural or is clearly not written by man, if we have evidence or at least a reasonable argument that at least one verse or one statement or one element or one part of the Torah is divine, well, then once it's divine, we could assume that other parts are divine as well. It means we have no reason to not believe it once we could prove some part of it. I mean, if we knew that 99% of the Torah is true, and we have evidence for 99% of the Torah, and there's one verse in Genesis that, well, there's no evidence either way. Well, it should be enough. The ones we can rely, exactly. So the point is we don't have to prove every single line in the Torah on its own merit as being true. But once we could prove the Torah in its totality, if we could somehow glean or gain confidence in belief that Moses is an authentic prophet clearly, and then he delivers us the book, okay, well, that's enough.
Like if this is all true,
yeah,
Torah, God,
Mm-hmm.
Moses, et cetera,
Mm-hmm.
then 6.5 billion people in the world are living.
Not necessarily. That's an important point because, but that first of all,
not Gentile.
Yeah, we'll get to
Everybody but the 17 million Jews that are living.
That's what I mean.
Well,
Yeah.
okay, but I think that's a mistake. Let me tell you why. First of all, the idea of lots of people living a lie is a reality no matter what. And I'll prove to you. You know why? We have two major religions, Christianity, lumping all Christianity in one, and Islam. Each one of them are mutually exclusive. It's not possible for them both to be right. And both of them have the my way or the highway attitude, right? If you don't believe in JC, right, eternal damnation, right? If you don't accept Muhammad Rasulullah, then Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Harb, right? That's what they both claim. That's the fabric of the philosophy of those religions. So either way, we already have 1 billion people that are for sure wrong. For sure.
Because they each cancel at each other.
But no, because they both can't be right. And they both, if one is right, the other one is wrong. So then at least 1 billion people are wrong. So the fact that there's 1 billion people wrong, that in itself is not so surprising. What actually is, thankfully for mankind, if Judaism is true, that doesn't mean necessarily that 6.5 billion people live in a lie. Why? Because according to Judaism, all the Gentiles need not observe the Torah. Is that right?
Wasn't Judaism intended to be the smallest of people?
Yes, so it's not a universal, exactly. As opposed
to be an example.
Exactly. As opposed to Christianity and Islam, where they have a kind of a universal vision wherein the religion conquers all, Judaism is not like that. We don't proselytize. Proselytization is against the Torah.
Was there ever during the millennium?
Yes, there were some times during the Hasmoneans, the late Hasmoneans, where they forcibly converted the Samaritans. So thus Herod the Great was of dubious Jewish standing because he was a descendant of those Samaritans. Yes, so there were exceptions, but those people acted outside of the law. Yes, so the fact that
time where we were,
there was a time. There was that one time, 100 years of Hasmonean law. So first and second.
What about the verse that says, "I will make you as the sands of the sea,
The stars of the sky.
Yeah, there will be many.
Oh well, that's
that relate
okay, but that's yes. That's told to Abraham when Abraham is promised to be the father of this great nation. So it's told him that his kids will be as numerous as the sand the sand and the stars. So the simple understanding is that we will have in people there will be as many Jews as there are granules of sand. Now, if you know how many granules of sand there are, According to the estimation that I read, it's a number with 17 digits. Clearly, that's not what the Torah intends. And you know what? They actually found that the number of stars in the known universe is a number that's like 16 times that number. So
what does the
So what does it mean? So it could mean one of several things. It can mean that just like the sand on the beach is such an enormous number, such a power that you cannot possibly count it. So too, the Jewish people have this quality of not being limited to numbers. The verse talks about, we read it a few weeks ago in the Parsha, that you're not allowed to count Jews. So if you have Jews in the room, you can't say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Why? Because the second you assign a finite, fixed number to Jews, you're limiting them. There's 10 Jews, not 12. There's 150 Jews and not 200. It's a finite number. That's why when they used to do censuses, each person would donate a shekel or a half shekel coin, and they would count the coins. They wouldn't count the people. So one of the ideas of sand and stars is that the innumerability of the nation. Not necessarily that we will be around. In fact, as the Torah explicitly does say in Deuteronomy that we will forever be small in number. Yeah. So the Torah explicitly says that we will not be the biggest nation. So what it means it will be as numerous, it means that we have this quality of not being limited to a number. That's number one. Number two, the quality of a Jew, more so than all humans, is that a Jew has this wide spectrum of accomplishment. God tells Abraham, your children will be the Jewish people. That will be the most remarkable nation on the planet. They'll be the nation that will spur the entire world to accept morality. We're the moral compass of the entire world. We're the guardians. We're the ambassadors of God in the world. That gives us enormous opportunity, enormous responsibility. But we also have the potential liability of not fulfilling our role. Now, what's the most base or sedentary thing in the world? Earth, sand. It doesn't move, it just stands there. What's the most remarkable illuminating element of our universe? The sun. We have this duality, or this option, this dichotomy of not fulfilling our potential and being like the sand, does nothing for the world. It's just there, doesn't move, doesn't inspire. Or it could be like the sun and the stars. We could illuminate the entire world. So God tells Abraham, your children are going to be my people. But remember, they could be like the sand, not very impressive, not exactly set in the world on fire, or it could be like the stars. And there's even a little deeper that, the word for... Well, that's the same sand of the beach, but Earth is just sedentary, doesn't do anything, just sits there. Additionally, another element to explain that particular verse in Genesis is that the Hebrew word for man, Adam, the Talmud says etymologically is half Adama, which means earth, half Adameh, which means I'll be similar to God. Man is a fusion of body and soul, thus a fusion of physicality. You drop a dead body into the earth, it eventually disintegrates and becomes like the earth itself. God created man from the earth, on one hand. On the other hand, we have a soul, which is compared to the Almighty. And if you guys remember, you guys should remember this. What happened to Moses when Moses accomplished or achieved the greatest spiritual status of any human? What happened to his face? I don't remember what happened to his face. And a little bit like what? Like the sun, right? So it says the face of Moses, like the face of the thing you missed this class, Steve. The face of Moses. Remember, with the three things that are measured the world to come, like the sun, right? Our soul is compared to the sun, right? And our body is compared to the earth. Thus, the Jewish people are the fullest manifestation of humans in we're half sand and half stars. And we have the opportunity of becoming stars, superstars, supernovas, rock stars. And we look at Moses, the greatest man that ever lived, and you know what? He had to wear a mask. We know that. We read that in the Parsha last week. Moses had to wear a mask because his face was as bright as the sun. Because he was able to divest himself of the influence of his body, and thus all that was left is the influence of his soul. So yes, when it says that the Jewish people will be as numerous as the sand and stars, it does not necessarily mean that they will actually have the population. It can be one of those three things that we said, and especially we could safely argue that's the simplistic understanding when the Torah explicitly elsewhere says that the Jewish people will not be large in number, will be very few in number. So, but back to Bernie's question, the fact that there are millions and billions of non-Jews out there, so the fact that we have to assume that it can't be that so many people are wrong. Well, either way, at least a whole bunch of people are wrong. Remember, the Christians and the Muslims are it's not possible for them both to be right. So there's at least a billion people out there wrong. But thankfully for humanity, the Jewish people do not believe you have to be Jewish to be good. We have the pluralistic idea of if you follow the 7 Noahide laws, if you're basically a decent person, you're considered a righteous of the Gentile, and you have a portion of the world to come, you're good to go.
It's interesting when we talk as Americans, we're always talking about the Christians and Islam. We have this huge group of Hindus and Buddhists, and nobody even...
Yeah, but they're not in the Western world, probably. That's probably the argument, The fact that there's, a billion Hindus earning $1 a week in India doesn't seem to...
Well, there are more and more of these in the Western world.
Yeah, okay, but...
Their numbers are still small by comparison to the others.
Either way, so that's that. So we're going to try to embark on this journey of examining some of the evidence. I actually gave a 5-part series on this topic because the evidence is copious, it's voluminous. There is a remarkable amount of evidence. I spent some time also talking about some of the quote-unquote counter evidence or counter proofs to the Torah or the questions, kind of the classic Bible criticism questions or some of the moral questions or some of the ethical, philosophical questions. There are some questions that need to be engaged with thoughtfully and sensitively. So it's a lot. We're going to try to do this all in one class. We probably won't be successful. But we're going to have a challenge because, like I said, it's going to agitate every one of us here. We all have built-in biases, and I'm saying myself included. We all have a way of life, and we feel threatened when that is questioned. No one wants to reassess their life and their priorities and what they consider to be important, and what they kind of, just probably by default, how they establish their relationship with the Torah. You say most people let's assume it's somewhere in the middle. Everyone has lots. Whenever there's an argument, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. So you have the fundamentalists saying the Torah is 100% true, and then you have the people say it's not true. Let's probably assume it's somewhere in the middle. We probably subconsciously or even consciously, we kind of establish that, that equilibrium for ourselves. But for the purpose of this discussion, we're going to try to start with a clean slate and see where the evidence brings us. But it's not going to be easy, especially, this is an important point, especially because we have an incentive for the Torah to not be true. Because the second the Torah is true, it's binding for us. As Jews, right, if the Torah were to be true, if we can magically prove that 1,000% that it's true, we would all be in a quandary because that would mean a lot for us. Their implications are real. So we have an incentive to try to disprove it, and the whole world has an incentive because the fact, if the Torah is true, well, then God is true, and therefore morality is true, and therefore afterlife is true. All those things are the after effects of the butterfly effect of the Torah. And I have some examples here. This is an article that I pulled from the New York Times. This is called "Camels Had No Business in Genesis." Title. And this article, to me, the New York Times, one of the most prestigious,
Democratic.
Yeah, okay, but I'm saying it's a prestigious journalistic, entity or
All the news that's fit to print.
All the news that's fit to print. So this is an article, very short article. I have a copy of this. It's written by John Noble Wilford of. I doubt he won any Pulitzer from reading this article. Either way, this was in the New York Times. Exactly. So this is a year ago, February 2014, And they said this article your eyeballs will pop out if you read this, literally on the floor. Why? Because they argue. This article, I think, is a
Yours?
yeah. I had to pick him up, scoop him. This article is an example of the vendetta that people have against the Torah, and even someone like the New York Times. Somehow they slip by the publishers. Yeah. But the article is basically that hey, look, the Torah, lots of stories of camels. Abraham had camels, and Jacob had camels, and Joseph was brought with camels to Egypt. Lots of camels in Genesis. Camels had no business in Genesis. Camels weren't domesticated until much later. That's the argument. The stories Genesis happened about 3,800 years ago, so about 1,800 before the Common Era, 1817, depends where in Genesis you're talking about. And Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph have camels. And we know now it's not true, says the New York Times. How do we know it's not true? What's the argument? How do you know that it's anachronistic? Right? Anachronistic is where you have a historical document that references items that were not yet invented. So, like if you read a book about Julius Caesar taking an Uber to Temple Beth Torah, right? If you read that, you say, okay, wait a minute. When was Uber invented? Cars, right? Let's move back. Okay, Julius Caesar lived 2,000 years ago, right? That's an anachronism. So they want to argue here that camels in Genesis are anachronistic. What's the evidence? So the evidence is from an Israeli guy. Shockingly, an Israeli guy wants to contribute to this. Noam Mizrahi, an Israeli biblical scholar. What's the evidence? How do we know that Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph, 3,800 years or 800 years before the Common Era, did not have camels?
Well, you're saying that because they weren't domesticated.
Because they weren't domesticated. How do you know they weren't domesticated?
That I don't know.
So what they say is because like this.
They could still have them whether they were domesticated or not.
That's one argument, okay? Two archaeologists in Tel Aviv University, they found domesticated camels in the 10th century before the Common Era. Centuries after the patriarchs lived, and decades after the kingdom of David, according to the Bible, which is actually not true. But either way, they couldn't find any camels that were domesticated earlier. You hear this?
That's what he cited.
They found. Well, that's also. Well, let's assume that they're right. Okay, let's assume that they found domesticated camels dated to the 10th century before the Common Era. Doesn't prove nothing.
Yeah, that doesn't mean
You were at
12 or 15, or I'm like, it's like imagine I went to the library and I said, show me I want to see the archives of the New York Times. I found there was an article from May 15th, 1952. Clearly, there was no New York Times articles published before that, right? I mean, that's what passes for journalism with regards to trying to disprove the Torah. This passes. If you could show me that camels existed after Abraham, clearly Abraham didn't have it. That's what the argument is saying. You read the article yourself. I have the article here, so you guys can pass it around. Everyone go read it. That's what it says.
makes me feel my feeling about the New York Times.
So, what's clear is that I think, like, would this go for any, like, would this pass for other? Maybe it would. Maybe they just had a bad day at the journalism office there. Perhaps. All I know is that this was published in the New York Times as a refutation of the Torah. And if you read it very quickly, you didn't stop to say, wait a minute. What? If you didn't ask that question, oh, okay, well, they were only in 10th century before the Common Era, not 18th century before the Common Era. Like, that would perhaps be enough. What's clear is that this is an example of someone trying to disprove the Torah or say that there are anachronisms in the Torah based on nothing. Absolutely nothing. So,
this is when you say that the absence, how does that go? The
absence of proof
absence
is
of
not proof of
evidence
absence.
is not the evidence of absence.
Right. Okay, so let's start. Let's start with miracles and revelations. We open up the Torah, we find a lot of miracles. We have Abraham doing miracles. We have Jacob. We have Joseph having these miraculous dreams and the prophecies. Jacob having the dreams of the angels. And Moses, the burning bush someone mentioned. 10 plagues, miraculous plagues that brought the entire Egyptian empire to its knees. We have splitting of the sea. We have many, many, many examples of miracles in the Torah. And these miracles, go ahead.
Over how long a time?
We're talking about a year. A year.
1 year. All those plagues in 1 year?
Yes. All in 1 year. From Moses at the age of 79 to Moses at the age of 80. And the plagues were, each one of them lasted a week. Moses predicted them beforehand. Or some of them he predicted before them, some of them he didn't. But all of them shared the commonality that they only struck the Egyptians. So you have a Jew and the Jew and the Egyptian drink from a glass of water. The Egyptian drinks blood, and the Jew drinks water. The frogs only go to the Egyptian houses. The lice only plague the Egyptians, etc., etc. The animals of the Egyptians die, but not the Jews. The wild beasts attack the Egyptians, but not the Jews. The hail of ice and fire destroy the Egyptians' homes and properties and livestock, not the Jews, etc., etc. Death of the firstborn. Who dies? All the firstborn of the Egyptians. And this is all delineated in the Torah. Darkness. Everyone's frozen in place for 7 days. V'chol Yisrael hayel or b'chol moshe same, something like that. The verse says, but the Jewish people had light. So directed, a calculated plague on the Egyptians, not on the Jews. So these are the miracles that are told in the Torah. We have the book. We still have the book today. We could all read it. It's copied into many, many languages. One of the best-selling books of all time. The book's the Torah. Stories of miracles. Narratives of miracles. Okay. Well, Abraham, for example, he battled with the Abraham battled with that four of the battle of the 4 armies versus the 5 armies. Single-handedly beat. He talked to God. Prophecy. That's a miracle. The miracle means supernatural, something which is clearly an event that can only happen if God is running the show. So that's how I define a miracle for this purposes. So he communicates with God. What other miracles? Well, he meets those 3 angels. They come to his house. The 3 messengers. The Hebrew word is malachim. Yeah, well, that's the angel. The angel speaks to him. That's right. So that and other examples. So the question that we have to ask, I think, if we're going to be logical skeptics, which is what we have to be, what are the questions that we have to ask when we read these stories? I think there's a few questions. Question number 1: is it true or is it baloney? Did it happen? Did Abraham even exist? How do we know it? Abraham, remember, he appears 500 years before Moses appears. Thus, and the book is written by Moses. The book itself says it's written by Moses. So Moses is the author. Assuming Moses is the author, and he's writing about Abraham, it happened 500 years earlier. Who knows? That's a long time. A lot could have transpired. How do we know? Moses never met Abraham. Abraham died way before Moses was born. He's his great-great-great-great-grandfather. Right? So the question is, how did it happen? Did it happen at all? And every miracle that we say, Elijah revives the dead, or Elisha revives a dead boy, or the Talmud tells us of miracles. Pinchas ben Yair, he split the sea. Joshua split the sea. It's another great example. How do we know it's true? What evidence do we have? Maybe it's false. Maybe it was made up afterwards. I can write a book today, talk about some other guy that I made up. I can Bernie the prophet. I can make up a story. I can write it. Bernie, whatever he did, right? He lifted the mountain and crushed it between his hands and then swallowed it.
The mountain just fell in West Virginia.
Yeah, exactly. That was Bernie. Right? It's the path should be very clear. Like this is a book that we don't know. We're around 2015. We're going back thousands of years. And we have to ask ourselves the question, okay, maybe the book was making up stories. Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's true. Well, how do we know? We have to find evidence one way or the other. How do we know that the historicity of the miracles of the Torah? That's the question number 1 I think we should ask. Is that right? Everyone agrees? Legitimate question? Yeah? Sure. That's for sure a legitimate question. And you know what? For the sake of argument, we should ask the same question of any miracle we hear. Not if it's Jews. If it's Joseph Smith in the mountains of New York, right? He claims to... There's the claim, the golden tablets, the Reformed Egyptian, the Book of Mormon. It's a claim, and it's a miracle. He meets the angel. Okay, it's a miracle. How do we know it's true?
And Mormonism is one of the fastest growing religions in the world.
Yes, it is.
Mormonism?
Mormonism.
Well,
Particularly
it
in
starts
South
from
America.
1 and goes to 2. That's pretty fast.
Well,
it's
South
not
America
like a billion
is
to 2
just
billion.
huge.
well, why did you just? I'm just curious. why
Joseph
you said
Smith,
Mormon should regular Christians
Or exactly.
Jesus ascend to heaven.
Exactly. That's another great example. Every religion has its miracles. Muhammad is a prophet. Allegedly, right? All these are allegedly. And we can say the same thing. Allegedly, Abraham is a prophet, for the sake of arguments. JC, Paul. Right? Paul has a miracle. JC revives the dead, or JC walks on water, whatever you want to say. How do we know it's true? Maybe it was made up.
It's because there aren't any witnesses, right?
Okay, so maybe we'll have to figure out how to employ that into our analysis of the evidence. Okay, that's the first question. Number 2, how do we know if something is, maybe it would happen? Let's say if I brought in, David Blaine or David Copperfield here, they could do a trick and they could convince us that the Statue of Liberty disappeared, or they walked through the Wall of China. Like maybe Moses or Abraham or JC or anyone was, a very talented magician. So somehow the miracle was accepted, but it was, it wasn't real. It's not real evidence to divine interplay.
Penn's done some wonderful things. I don't think he's God though. But,
what does he do?
He does do.
Really?
Yeah.
Like you show your cards and like
He's
reach in your pocket. Oh
A
wow.
lot of rabbits.
There's a great story. There's a great story in the Talmud that tells of this one Jew who went to Alexandria, which was the hub of sorcery. And he says that he went and he bought a donkey. And he bought it from the Egyptian guy. The Egyptians did sorcery all the time. And he got home and it started raining on the way home. He's walking with his donkey, and it started raining on the way home. And his donkey just melted and became a plank of wood. Somehow the guy managed to change, to take a plank of wood and somehow do some sort of illusion, some sort of sorcery to make it look like a walking donkey. And then he went to his friends. He's like, "What the heck just happened?" He's like, "Of course you know. Every time you buy anything from the Egyptians, you have to douse it in water. Of course, everyone knows that. He didn't douse it in water." They're like, "Why? Why should they?" Because that's what they did. The sorcery was a big deal. How they did it, who knows? But assuming that was possible, we have to ask ourselves the question: was it real? Was it divine? Is this something real, or is this some sort of sleight of hand? And one way to find that out is how many times did it happen? Once, if you were tricked once into buying the plank of wood, you would next time make sure you take the hose and spray it real good. You would investigate it. So the miracles, did they happen once, happen twice, happen 1,000 times? How broad was the reach of the miracles? And that makes it very hard to falsify. So obviously, if you have a miracle that happens every day, or if you have a miracle that happens for years and years, then it seems to have more legitimacy than a miracle that happens once, that, JC walked over water. Okay, well, maybe he was wearing those fancy shoes that have those flotation devices on them. But if every day someone's walking on water, every single day, and you watch it from all angles, he'll do the magic trick twice. We had a magician come to one of but there was an event that I was at, the magician was there. And he did this fantastic trick. He did it to me. He basically put an entire deck of cards in my hands. He's like, okay. And he did some sort of shtick. And he's like, okay, now open your hands. I'm like, what are you going to see? I'm like, I still have that deck of cards there. I open up and there's a block of glass in my hand. I'm like, what? How did he do that? But then he did it again, and I videotaped him. Then I saw what he did. He diverts your attention. He does like this, and then with his left hand, he pulls out the block of ice and replaces it.
How does he get it in your hand without you feeling?
No, because he puts the top card as a card. Then he pulls it out. Oh, that's your card. Oh, okay.
The card covered the glass.
I get it.
Yeah, he does two tricks. He does two tricks at once. He's like, okay, here's your card. Okay, good. Okay, what do you have in the rest of your hand? But then once he did it twice, I'm like, okay, I got it. If someone does the trick again and again and again and again, or someone does the miracle again and again, and it's experienced by a lot of people, of course, the broader the reach of the miracle, the less likely it is to be false.
I used to do magic too. The most important rule is a good magician never does the same trick twice with the same audience, because it's more likely to be found out.
Really?
So that's another example. If it was a trick, it's likely going to happen once, only once. If it's a real miracle, it potentially can happen again and again. And lastly, this is also a very important question. What is proof? Let's assume JC did walk on water. Let's assume for everything he did, there was no flotation device, no pontoons, nothing. It was real. So what? What does that prove? So it was a miracle. It proves it was a miracle. Does it prove that he was God or anything like that? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Let's say JC revived the dead and ascended to heaven. Does that prove anything? No. Why? Does it prove that he's a God? No. Why? How do we know? Way before JC ever arrived, we have Elijah ascending to heaven. We have Elijah reviving the dead. We have many, many stories of people splitting seas, of people. We have Rabbi Eliezer, one of the Tanaim, the teacher of Rabbi Akiva. What did he do? He was able to uproot a tree without touching it. Uproot a tree and move it 400 feet away. He said something, and the walls of the base matters caved in. The walls of the house of study caved in. He said another thing, and the river started flowing the opposite direction. Did anyone for a second claim that he was God? Absolutely not. Did anyone for a second claim that Moses said he was God? Also not. A miracle does not necessarily... Assuming a miracle is true, what is a proof is the last question we have to ask. Okay? Bless you, yes. Okay, so that's what we have to ask. So what does the Torah say? So Torah records many prophecies, miracles, and also predictions. Maybe we'll get to that as well. So what's a list? Just give a list of some miracles here. So the 10 plagues of Egypt we mentioned. Each one of them directed, guided, this is the story. We'll have to see if it's true or not. Death of the firstborn, parting of the sea. The entire sea suddenly parts and everyone was able to walk in dry land. Jewish people, that's what it says in the Torah. It's with great pomp and details. The sea splits, this is in Exodus. Sea splits, Jewish people walk through, the Egyptians follow suit, and the water crashes down upon them. They're able to walk in dry land.
Kinds of attempts of explanation. Real explanation.
Yeah, real. What do you mean real?
Non-miraculous.
Volcano.
Yeah.
Santorini.
That's number one. Now, how do they explain this? During the 40 years that the Jewish people were this is just for what the book itself says. During the 40 years that the Jewish people were in the desert, in the wilderness, what did they eat? Who knows? Manna. What is manna?
Bread from heaven.
What does it mean?
Could be poetic. I mean, it may not.
It details. Well, it tells us what it is. It tells us what it looked like. It tells us what it tasted like. And it says that it fell down from heaven, everyone on their doorstep. For 40 years, a nation, what the Torah says, 603,500 adult males. We can extrapolate from that. We're talking about a nation of at least 1 million people.
Except that they did not collect manna on Saturday.
That's right.
They collected a double portion on Friday.
That's what it says. That's right. Mentions this manna several times. They ate a magical food. For how long?
40
They ate it. That's what they ate. According to the Torah.
You're saying they didn't hunt? I just assumed they hunted. I didn't know that.
We're in the desert. Where are they hunting?
And the quail. We'll get to that in a second.
What'd you say, Bernie?
This is what the Torah says. The Torah says that the entire nation of more than 1 million people, they subsided on food that rained down from heaven, what it tastes like, what it looked like. Oh, we'll get to the quail in a second. That's what they ate. That's what they ate. For 40 years.
For quail.
So if you do the math, right, how much food are we talking about? Right, so let's do the math here for a second. We know that there's 600,000 adult males. We could safely assume that there's a commensurate amount of females, right? So we're talking about 600,000 plus 600,000, 1.2 million. If we assume there's 600,000 males between the age of 20 and 60, so for every 40 years, there's 600,000 males, we assume for every 20 years would be half that. Is that right? So from 0 to 20, we would assume that 300,000 males and 300,000 females. And let's assume there's some elderly. Let's keep the elderly out of here. We're going to talk about old people. Right? To the age of 60, we can safely argue that there's 1.8 million people. Thus, every day there's 1.8 million meals delivered from the sky. Times how many days are there in a year, Dad? Let's do the math here. Oh, is that right? Okay. So let's say this 1.8 million times 365 times 40.
Added on a month,
So we're talking about hundreds upon billions of meals delivered from the sky. That's the claim. For 40 years.
I'm liking
Billions of meals delivered from the sky.
cookie. No.
That's what the claim, that's what the argument is. It's not a one-time event. This is not some sort of supernatural occurrence. And it's not something which you convince someone. You know, I can try and convince you that you're full. I convince you what you ate. Meals parachuting in. That's the claim. For someone to convince me, like if David Blaine convinced us that we had breakfast, maybe.
Okay, there's just please enlighten.
Yes, go ahead.
I don't think this would be very involved, but one of the whole laws of kashrut, which came during Moses' time,
Yes.
and before we got to the Promised Land, what were they? It wasn't magical.
Yeah, well, it was.
They were talking about.
Well, no, the manna wasn't meat or dairy.
No, I understand, but what? I mean, if we were getting these magical meals, well, why even have the laws of kashrut?
Well, the laws were because this was not going to last, right?
So this was just being taught about something in the future.
Yeah, this entire period is a remarkable period because it's the Jewish people basically living on this supernatural. But the point is, like, that's the claim. That's the miracle that's outlined in the Torah. We're talking about billions upon billions of meals delivered from the sky for 40 years to the nation of 2 million people.
So what's the counterclaim?
I have no idea what the counterclaim. The counterclaim has to be that it was all made up. Has
So
to be.
where does the issue of the quail come in? Because
Well, and the quail as well. So that's one thing. They had
quail
the
in
quarter.
the desert.
Yes,
Yeah,
actually, if you read the book,
it ascended.
Walking the Bible, they say that really happens, that there's huge...
Yeah.
Why would
Yeah.
you need the quail if you have manna being delivered?
They wanted me. I'll give you meat. They gave me so much.
It was the flesh pots
Came
of
out of their
Egypt.
nose.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on here. Who knows what they drink? What they drink?
Oh, water, but...
Where did the water come from?
Underground
A rock. And the rock moved around, right?
It was. This is the miracle that's claimed. A rock. I don't know. Maybe it was big or small rock. Let's assume it was I assume it was probably
It's a mobile rock.
a rock that traveled with him that was just gushing water. I would just drink. That's what everyone drank from. That's what the claim is. That's the miracle. They drank for how long? Millions of people for 40 years. You can assume we're also about billions upon billions of glasses.
But then the rock at one point got stuck. And
Right.
Moses
When-
had to talk, and-
Well, yes. So when Miriam, Moses' older sister, died,
Right.
the rock ceased operations because it was in her merit. God says, talk to the rock. He hit the rock, and that kind of caused a little disaster. That's at year 37.
Yes, but I
Or
thought the
35.
reason he got in trouble for that was he took the responsibility.
Yeah,
He
this is
he
a
said,
big
"Must I
discussion.
get the rock," as if it was him that was providing the water to spring forth from the rock, and not God.
Now, when they were traveling in the desert, the Torah says that for 40 years there was a cloud, a bunker buster cloud, a cloud that flattened mountains and destroyed predators that surrounded them from all four sides during the day. So they would walk on flat land. At night there was a pillar of fire surrounding them. That's what it says. This is for 40 years. It's not a one-time event. Additionally, this is what the Torah says. Their clothing grew with them. You had a clothing, you're a little kid, you got a little onesie, it becomes a little twosie, right? That's what the Torah says. Their clothing grew with them. And it's not a one-time event. It's not for one person. These are miracles that are encompassing an entire nation for decades upon decades. These are clearly the most unique and comprehensive set of miracles that ever happened. Question. Okay, so this is the question. So if these miracles are true, if these miracles are true, we clearly see divine intervention, we clearly see divine oversight, divine supervision, divine power, divine knowledge. That's clear. For sure. That's not. I don't think that's an argument. The question is, how do we know it's true? Maybe it was all made up.
Well, you could ask the reverse. How do you know it's not true?
Yeah, okay, but let's assume it is. Assuming it's true, or assuming we want to believe it's true. Okay, well, how do we know? Maybe it was made up. All we have is the book, right? We're working backwards from the book. That's all we have. How do we know that it's true?
You can't really. Well, maybe we'll find out today. But you can't really prove it didn't happen. But you can't necessarily prove it did happen.
Well, let's see what the evidence is. Okay. All right, none of us were there, right? So we're working backwards. So we have to say, did it either happen or didn't happen? Is that right? Those are the only two options.
And the first evidence of the Torah being written was what, 500 BC?
Well, extant copies of the Torah?
Yeah.
The oldest copies of the Torah that we have today, well, we know that the Torah was copied in the 3rd century before the Common Era. It was copied into Greek. The Septuagint, that's right, on the Talmud. So we know that it was in the hands of Gentiles for at least 2,200 years. We have Jewish traditions before that. But we know that it's an ancient document for sure. It's not a new document. No one could argue that. No one could argue it was invented 500 years ago.
The Septuagint is the oldest. No,
I didn't say that. That's why what I said is that Septuagint is the first time that it ended up in non-Jewish hands. So it was in our hands, and then you could argue away, or maybe it was tampered, or whatever. The Jewish people, they kind of perpetuate this myth. That would probably be the argument that most people who want to reject the overwhelming evidence would pursue.
The Masoretic text, when that.
The whole Masoretic era is in the 8th, 9th, 10th century.
I was going to say, I thought that was before.
No, that's not the text. The era where they spent a lot of time there. But we have extant copies from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Those are 2,000, 2,100, 2,200 years old that we have today.
There's still some that I know we haven't found.
But then all this means we don't have a document that goes back. I'm saying we have traditions, we have documentations, we have stories, we have names of people, we have a lot, but we don't have any kind of impartial observer that was there that we still meet. They're still around today that would tell us. So we have to work with what we have, with system evidence we have. So the question like this. We have these wonderful miracles, and if they're true, we could accept the Torah as being true, we could accept God as being true, etc. But how do you know that these miracles are actually happened? So this is a few important points we have to link together. Number one, the book says Moses, who was obviously a prime player in this whole narrative, he wrote the book and he gave the book to the nation. So the argument that the book was written either by Moses but delivered to a different people or by someone else entirely and who convinced an entire nation are both disproved by the book itself. Because the book itself says Moses wrote the book and gave it to the nation that experienced those miracles alongside him. So the book itself says that this book was given by Moses to the very people that were eating the manna and were eating the quail and that had the experience of their clothes growing to them and had drank the water from the rock and had experienced all that. Those are the people that received the book. That's what it says in the book itself. Thus, if it happened in a way other than the way it described, the people that received the book, they would know automatically that it's not true. Because all you got to do is read the book and say, wait a minute. The book says the Moses gave it to us. Who's Moses? I see Ezra. Or I see Jeremiah. I see Ezekiel. I don't see Moses. Where's Moses? Right? And no one had a reference, no one had a record of this book beforehand. This guy wrote the book just now. He says, how does the press look at my new book? My name is Ezra. Here, it's true. It's from God. Observe all the laws. You say, okay, maybe it is. Let's see. What? Moses wrote the book? Not Ezra? And Moses gave it to the people that experienced these miracles? Not to me, who's 800 years later? I mean, if it happened in a way other than the way it claims to have happened, it is falsifiable from day one. Because it itself claims that Moses delivered the book to the very same people. And in generality, when we look at historicity of an event, if it's historical, if it was documented by the people or in the era of the people that it happened to. Thus, Christianity, so the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were written after Jesus is dead for at least 60 years. 60, so 60, 70, 90, different, right? It's not historical. It wasn't written by anyone that had ever met Jesus, right? So it is already, and it doesn't claim to be historical because it's very hard to claim that you're historical because it's falsifiable, right? Books that are false are not necessarily perpetuated to millions and revered by millions because it's disproven from day one. The Torah is the only one that has this. Not only that it has the miracles that allegedly happened to millions of people, those same millions of people got the book. And that's what it says inside the book. So if it didn't happen the way it purported to have happened, would we still have a copy of it today? Would it still be revered by millions across the world? How would it get started? And let's imagine it wasn't true. Let's, for argument's sake, imagine it wasn't true. How would someone go about developing and selling this idea? Assuming it's Moses, right? Let's say I'm Moses. I wrote the book. It says I wrote the book. But it says I delivered it to the people, to a nation of millions of people, not 22 people or 12 disciples or anything like that. Millions of people. It says I gave the book to them. They were there. They saw. Where are all the people that saw if they didn't see?
Rabbi, I understand your point, but let me just focus on the
Go ahead.
contemporary nature you seem to be emphasizing here, that this was written by Moses and given at that time, with what you tried to contrast, I think, with Christianity, which was 60 years, 70 years later.
I'm saying it's not historical, it was written at the same
Okay,
time.
I understand. But yet, millions more
Yeah.
revere and follow Christianity than
That's true.
Judaism.
That's true.
So just because there was maybe a 70-year gap.
No, okay, but right now, for our argument's sake, we're not debating the reach of the respective religions. We're debating the veracity of the respective religions and the veracity of the respective miracles. Every religion is based upon a certain divine quality or divine claim. There's a divine claim in every religion. Judaism, also Christianity as well, Islam, Mormonism. Every example that you want to bring. There's a prophet who claims to have some sort of miracle or revelation, and they teach the tenets, the beliefs of that nation. That's my point. How different is Judaism from every other one? Number one, the book is written at the same time that the miracles happened by the same people. No. Okay, we'll get to the Ten Commandments in a second. But the Torah itself, Moses delivered it to the entire nation.
And did he deliver it orally?
No. Written. He wrote it. He wrote it. Delivered orally as well. He delivered orally as well. But we're talking about the physical book. The very same people that experienced the miracles received copies of the book, or so it claims. That's what it says. If it was falsified, my point's like this: we have to argue both sides against each other. So it may be true, maybe it's false. What is more reasonable? Could we imagine a situation where it was false? Is it possible for us to concoct a situation where it's false? It would be very, very hard. You have to have someone, either Moses or someone else, but someone perpetuate a very clear, bold-faced lie. Why? If Moses was the one, let's say if it's Ezra, like a lot of people claim, Torah was written by Ezra. Right? Torah was written by Ezra. A lot of people make that claim, like quote-unquote Bible scholars. There's a fundamental problem with that. The Torah itself says it was written by Moses. The Torah itself says that there's millions of people that experience something. If those people didn't experience something, and Ezra's trying to sell this, how does he sell it? How would you go about selling it? You can't do it because you're selling something which is in itself, just by reading the book, untrue. And let's say Moses did it, but it never happened. So you would say, hey, Moses, wait a minute. I read the book. It says there's 600,000 people that experienced the Mount Sinai experience. And that were in Egypt and that saw the plagues and ate those billions of meals delivered from God. And Who are those people? Where are those people? How come no one remembers of these people? How come you're the one who tells us about the people? And also, it says in the book that you, Moses, delivered it to those people. I don't remember that happening to me. Did it happen to you? Do you remember being 40 years in the wilderness and drinking water from a rock? I don't remember that. I've been living in Kingwood. I don't know anything about no desert, no wilderness. Moses, I don't believe you're telling the truth. And you know what? I'm not going to live my life based upon these very restrictive laws that you have for me because I know you're a snake oil salesman. You're a charlatan. Right? Who would follow the very detailed minutiae of laws that are very restrictive? What I can eat, what I can do on Shabbat, what do I have to, the mitzvahs I have to do, the charity I have to do, all the restrictions. The Torah is full of restrictions. I want to have my cheeseburger. Why should I listen to Moses?
People are very suggestive.
Very gullible.
It's easy.
Okay, so this is where we have arrived. The only way for the Torah to not be true, is if Moses convinced a nation of millions of Jews, of our antecedents. Remember, you can't convince. The Jews themselves are a stiff-necked people, right? And we still see it today. It has transferred genetically very, very well. This quality, right? So the only way for us, the only argument that we could try to finagle to try to say the Torah is not true is that Moses somehow was able to enchant the people to such a degree, these stiff-necked people that didn't listen to him at all. And Moses, by the way, if I was Moses and I was writing the Torah, I would not write as many derisive things about myself, as an aside. Moses is vilified. These are all like kind of the ancillary proofs, the kind of the psychological perspective. If Moses himself was writing it, he would certainly do a better job in raising his profile. There's no one in the Torah who's castigated as much, as often, or as harshly as Moses.
And I've also heard the argument that...
No, when he gave Moses,
but we're moving away from
this to all the people. They were mostly illiterate. Were they not? Were they literate?
Yeah.
Was there a written language then, or did it just erupt?
Well,
The Hebrew word to read is also the same word.
They gave
Yes.
he wrote this out. For
the Jews, yes, the Jews were always literate. So okay, so what's the argument? I'm sorry?
Literate as slaves.
Absolutely. The Jewish people, whenever they were in the harshest of times, the Jewish people were always literate.
So Pharaoh sent them to school.
Not Pharaoh, their parents taught them. At times, this is an important point. At times where the general population was 99.9% illiterate, the Jews always had 100% literacy, always, throughout the generations. Why would you think that was different at that time? The grandchildren of Abraham weren't literate? Come on.
You have to remember, though, the people in the desert weren't just Jews, they were a mixed multitude.
That's right.
Many Jews stayed in Egypt.
Yeah.
I mean, many Egyptians, and those ones who caused the majority of the problems.
I want to say that
80% left.
Died. 80% died.
Oh, 80% died? You mean in the desert?
no,
in Egypt.
They didn't leave Egypt, they stayed.
No, a large percentage didn't leave Egypt.
And also
Okay.
that they put so many negative features of so many of the characters, that none of them are perfect human beings. They all have flawed. Whereas if it was written by people.
Yeah, that's a good argument. Yes. Let's move another step ahead here.
He's really rolling up his sleeves.
Abraham does miracles, Jacob does miracles. Those are not historical either.
Those are not what?
Not historical either. Moses lived after them, right? Moses lived after them. Thus, Moses writes the Torah. It's not historical. Why do we believe the miracles about Abraham? It's a good question, right? Is that any different than the miracles about JC or miracles about anyone? Right? It's not verified. It's one person, right? We see the miracles about Moses in those entire 40 years. That was experienced by millions and verified by millions. There's hundreds of billions of meals that were delivered. All of like that we hear. But the Torah gives other miracles. What about that? The answer is absolutely you're right. if all we had were the miracles about Abraham, we would be no different than everyone else. That does not distinguish us from everyone else. That does not distinguish our faith profile in the context of the Torah from all the other religions. It doesn't. However, this is a cool, important point. Moses is called the father of all prophets. Ever heard that term? Father of all prophets. What does it mean father of all prophets? Was Abraham happened to be his great-great-great-grandfather. How is he the father of all prophets, even those that came before him? The answer is that Moses is a verified prophet. Moses, we all know, because we were all there. When I say we, I mean the collective millions of Jews that were there. They experienced at the foot of Mount Sinai Moses being called up as a prophet, disappearing onto the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. The Ten Commandments there, this incredible, miraculous experience that happened to millions of people. We know that Moses is a prophet. We have no doubt about it. We have evidence to that effect. Thus, when Moses tells us a story, it gives us the book. It says, oh, Abraham was a prophet. Why do we believe that Abraham's a prophet? Because Abraham's a prophet? We know that on its own right? Absolutely not. Rather, because Moses told us that Abraham is a prophet. Thus, we only believe in that Abraham is a prophet, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, because of Moses. And even the ones that come after him. Moses lays down the requirements of what constitutes prophecy, who could be a prophet, etc. The laws of prophecy, or the criteria of prophecy, was given to us by Moses. Thus, we believe to future prophets, Joshua, Ezekiel, Samuel, etc., only because of Moses as well. But Moses was personally verified by all of us. Now, okay, so locked out. So the book is historical. The book is contemporary to the time. If the book was recording the personal miracles of Moses, well, maybe Moses is lying, but in fact, the book is recording the miracles of everyone. Number one. Number two, if Moses gave the book to other people, well, Moses is lying, right? Because it says that Moses gave it to us. Moses gave the book detailing and delineating the miracles that happened to the very people that received the book. Now you'll say like this. This is the next point. Okay, what's the significance of the book? Maybe the people that accepted it, they accepted it only because the book didn't have that much of a ramification in their lives. Maybe they said, oh, you know what, we'll accept it. Moses is a really cool guy, but the story is nonsense.
I think that if you were living that life and you had manna coming down, I don't know. I can only go so down this road with you so far. I'm not so sure you would have all that much convincing to do because you're experiencing. Of course,
but remember, that's my point. If the manna did come down, of course.
If the manna
if the manna came,
marginalizing whether it did or it didn't. If you're there and you're experiencing it, this book is probably not that significant. Already you're there. You're experiencing it. How far of a stretch would the belief
it's
system
not at all,
have to be?
for sure. That's my point. If the manna, my point is, let's play devil's advocate here. Let's assume that the manna didn't happen. Let's assume it's not true, right? So you want to argue, you know what? Why was it accepted? Because they didn't make a big deal about it. It means my argument like this: if the manna is true, then we're fine. We're in the promised land. Assuming it's not true, let's assume it didn't happen. But Moses is a really cool guy. He donates a lot to the synagogue. Let's accept his word, even though it's nonsense. Would they do that if it was a book of fairy tales? Maybe.
A percentage would.
Perhaps a percentage would. But this is not a book of detail, of fairy tales. This is a book of law. Law that's binding for every single Jew. Law that's very restrictive. Law that unless you were convinced it was divine, you would never in your right mind follow it. Never. Who would follow these laws? Who would say, we get to the example of the laws, who would say, you know what? It's an agricultural society. You eat what you grow. You eat what you grow. If you don't have food to eat, you die. There's no Salvation Army or Houston Food Bank. But this book tells me, you know what? Every seventh year you take a year off. No agriculture. Don't plant a field. Don't plow the field. Don't worry. God will provide. unless you were absolutely convinced that this was the word of God, you would never in your right mind follow it. If the Jewish people treated the book of the Torah, or they accepted the book of the Torah, clearly they believed it, because otherwise they would never follow the laws, that many of them are very distant from accepting it on just simple human intellectual terms. Unless you were convinced that it was divine, you would never say, you know what, I'm taking a year off. Sabbatical. What am I going to feed my kids? They're going to be hungry. Don't worry, God will provide. Unless you were convinced that it was divine, go ahead.
And the trees too.
Trees, and that's an example. You take a day off of work or Shabbos. You don't plow your field. You don't plant your field. Nothing. Day
You don't
off.
milk your cows. You don't do anything.
A day off, an entire day off. Right? Would you do that?
Sure. I heard too that wasn't quite. I heard from another lecture that was quite common for people to marry their aunts and things like that, and the Torah comes out, so you can't do that anymore, and that means that those people had to
Divorce their wives.
divorce their wives.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. The Torah, the Midrash thing, Rashi quotes that people were pretty upset because they all had to divorce their wives.
But I mean, I'm not just negating what you just said, but you also look at the fact that in the history of Christianity, people let themselves be put in the arena and killed by the lions and all those terrible things they did on the basis of their faith too.
That's true. That's true. So they clearly. So my point. I agree with that point. People will only do these things if they're convinced that it's true. That's my point. I agree that's true, and I agree that there are a lot of Christians that are convinced that it's true. A lot of Muslims are convinced that it's true. My point is like this: the Jewish people had the most information at their disposal. I can convince you guys that something's true, but then I say, well, hey, listen, it happened to me in a dream. You'll never know if it's true or not. Right? I can say, listen, it's true, and I can convince you. You could believe in it and blow yourself up on a bus because that's what Muhammad wants of you, right? A lot of people could be convinced that's true. The Jewish people had the most information at their disposal to verify whether or not it was true or not. If you did not, experience the miracles in Egypt, be at the foot of Mount Sinai, eat manna in the desert for 40 years, right? Drink water out of a rock. If you didn't have that happen to you,
Fire by day or fire by
you would know it's not true.
Right. I think that there's a legal term. I'm
Yes,
not a lawyer,
go ahead.
But there is a legal term called the preponderance of evidence. And I think that's kind of the analogous to what you're saying. Yeah, you could believe based on, say, less evidence, so to speak, that Jesus did this, and so therefore I'm going to follow it. But there's more because of the contemporary nature of it, and just that people were living it at the time.
Is it a one-time
Judaism
event?
than, say, these other things.
That's right. It's not a one-time event. Remember, Jesus walked on water. He didn't. I don't know. He did it once, allegedly. Right? Written years and years and years. And he recorded years and years. But we don't have no historical evidence that ever existed. None. There isn't a single contemporary book that was written during his lifetime about this wonderful, great, influential individual. Right? There isn't. You go ahead.
So I certainly understand this Moses thing, but back up a second with Abraham, which again, Moses much later, there weren't any evidence. So,
That's right.
So based just like the JC, we can't really believe the Abraham.
Absolutely. But like I said, the only reason why you believe in Abraham is because of Moses. Yeah. Moses is called a verified prophet. If Moses had a Twitter account, it would have a little blue check next to it. Right? Because Moses was verified. We believe it was because we knew, we saw. Thus, when Moses tells us that Abraham was a prophet, we don't believe because Abraham told us or someone else told us. We believe because Moses told us.
Well, it's like believing the Gospels about JC then. They told us, and even though they weren't there.
Yeah, but they're not verified.
You mean it was because it says in the Torah that the Jewish people stood at Mount Sinai and heard the first few commandments. Is that right?
Well, so like we said, there's two. What we just started was the easy one. We did the easy, then we'll do the more difficult or more pervasive or more exhaustive or more influential, more powerful one. We just did the simple proof. But the simple proof is that they experienced these miracles, all of them individually. That's how you ate. What's on the menu for today? Manna. And tomorrow, manna. But wait a minute, I don't see any manna. Let's go to the store. The shelves are empty. There's no manna. It's going to descend from heaven. So you did today, tomorrow, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, following Sunday, next month, the month after, next year. That's what we're eating for 40 years. Okay, where are we going to drink? Can we invite the Culligan man in here? Right? At the Ozark? No, let's go to the Rock. That's how they live their life. They live their lives in the miraculous fashion. Go ahead.
Then why were they hungering for the flesh pots?
So that's a good question. The Torah castigates them for that. The Torah says is that they you know why? And the deeper level here is that the manna was a spiritual food. It wasn't like it wasn't a sizzling. They wanted a sizzling steak. They wanted something that their mouth could water, just like slather their face on. That's what they wanted.
I get it.
And they were called out for it. The manna is this incredible thin, crystal-like food that you had to concentrate on it. It was demanding. It was spiritual food, but it was food. That's what they ate. That was their bread. Nation, millions of people. That's remarkable. Let's get to the national revelation thing. And this is kind of the I would say the much higher level kind of evidence. A little bit more esoteric. But this is also an example that is unique to Judaism and something that if we want to contrast Judaism with a religion or just get a historical context for our religion, it should be something which is very eye-opening. So, every religion has the same model, I would say, that there's a prophet, or there's a conveyance of prophecy and a conveyance of tenets of belief, and it's going to be in a form that's a revelation, a form of revelation. So God comes over to the prophet and says, "Oh, here's the Book of Mormon," or "Oh, here's the Quran," or "Oh, here's the New Testament," etc., etc. And the same thing that happened to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai is the revelation. Now, what is the one major, crucial, pivotal, fundamental, essential difference between the revelation the Jewish people had and the revelation that the rest of the nations had? Difference is that the revelation that happened at Mount Sinai was the entire nation. 600,500 adult males, commensurate amount of females, at least 1.8 million people, probably more if you count people over the age of 60. We're talking about millions of people, all of them, there at the foot of Mount Sinai, experiencing prophecy, hearing God, seeing these magnificent just wonders, experiencing prophecy. This is the only time that there has ever been a claim of national prophecy. I'll repeat that point. Only one time, only one nation, only one people, only one event has there been even the claim of national prophecy. We're working post facto, right? We're here 2015, the Humble, Texas, right? What we can deduce is that every single claim of prophecy in all of human history has not been on a national public scale. Son one. There's been one experience in all of human history where there's even been a claim of national prophecy. Every other religion does not begin in that same fashion. That alone should open up our eyes. Why would it be different? Assuming it's false is an important point. Let's assume it was false. Let's assume other religions are false. Let's assume the majority of them, charlatans, most of them, right? How could the Jews pull off this great heist and no one else could do it? Assuming you have two religions, both of them made up their whole story. It's all made up. They made up a third nation. They all made it up, right? Religion doesn't exist, or it does exist. And maybe, I don't know, the Hindus, the Buddhists, or whatever. Someone's right, but everyone else is just a bunch of charlatans. How come only one nation could figure out how to do that? How come only the Jews were ingenious enough to try to even concoct the story of a national prophecy?
Sly little devils.
Isn't it the legalistic kind of Judaism?
No, the answer is that this is what happened.
The
It happened because it's impossible to falsify. I cannot convince you, no matter what, that you experience prophecy. It's not possible for me to do it. Prophecy is an experience that, unless you had it, you would never claim to have had it. Well, you might claim if you're in cahoots, but you won't have a nation claiming, millions of people claiming to have it and to follow the laws as a result of that. It's not possible. So whether or not Paul spoke to Jesus on the way to Damascus, or Jesus walked on water, or revived the dead, or Muhammad was a prophet, or we will never know. Okay? Joseph Smith is one guy claiming that he met the angel, and he gave him the golden tablets we've never seen written, reformed Egyptian language we never heard of, and he translated into English the Book of Mormon. Right? That's the claim. If he's telling you the truth, fantastic.
1820.
Yeah.
Was he able to convince all these
I don't know how he did it.
They're still going door to door doing it.
Yeah.
I read the book. There's a book about something about heaven. It's an antique.
Whether
Then came all these years later after Moses.
Of course, but the point is that the miracle, the revelation, the prophecy was one man. The claim of prophecy is one man. Claim of Muhammad, one man. No one experienced prophecy a long time. That's not even what they claim. The only claim of national prophecy is the Jewish people. And I want to do you guys something astonishing. This is from the book of Deuteronomy. I want you guys to check this in the King James Bible. I'm not putting tricks on you guys.
I have a King James.
King James or Eitz Chaim or any other Bible. I'm not making up the story.
No, but I mean, they're pretty much the same when you read the King James
But
version.
the King James mistranslates.
Of course they do.
Not much. Most of
No.
it looks the same.
Okay.
No, we
They certainly mistranslate.
This is from This is from Deuteronomy chapter 4. Inquire. God's giving us an instruction. Go ask. Inquire now regarding the early days that preceded you. Do some research. Go to the library. Go to the internet. Google it. From the day when God created man and earth, and from one end of the heaven to the other end of the heaven. Ask everywhere. Ask everyone you know. Since the beginning of time, since the earliest parts of human history. Ask. What should you ask? Has there ever been anything like this great thing? Or has anything like it been heard? Has this ever happened? Has this ever been claimed to have happened? Has a people ever heard the voice of God speaking from the midst of a fire as you have heard and survived? Has there ever been a nation that has even claimed to have national prophecy? The Torah predicts that it'll never happen. Ask everywhere. Ask everyone you know. Right? Ask everyone that you encounter. Investigate every religion. Has there ever been even a claim that an entire nation heard prophecy and survived? The Torah is going on a limb here. Listen to this, guys. The Torah is exposing itself. And it's saying, we have the story of national revelation. And we're so confident that this will only happen once that we're opening up our doors for being falsified. And we're making a prediction that it will never be claimed again. Ask from one to the other one, since God created man on the earth, has it ever happened? It's never happened. Only happened to the Jewish people. It was never claimed to have happened. The Torah is saying, if some nation claims that this happened, God spoke to the entire nation and they survived. The Torah is not true. We take it, we put it away, and we go, get mohawks. I don't know what we do. But we know the Torah is not true. The Torah is saying, if you find a claim of national revelation anywhere aside from our claim of national revelation, this entire book is invalidated.
What's the chapter?
This is chapter 4 of Deuteronomy, verses 32 and 33.
I don't want to split hairs here.
Let me finish the point here. Let me finish the point. Okay? Like this. Let's assume, for argument's sake, the Torah was written by man. It's all made up. Let's assume, for argument's sake. Somehow, some clever individual or group of individuals was able to convince or make this claim of national revelation. Think about this. Let's assume we are the convention that we're going to invent a religion and invent the whole story. We have to be a very intelligent either person or group of people. Clearly. Torah, everyone would agree, is written by one of the great authors and systemizers and moralists, and No one would say the Torah was written by a silly man. Some guy was just doodling. A bunch of monkeys were typing on typewriters. No one would argue that. Clearly, if the Torah was written by someone intelligent, whether it's God or man, that's for sure. No one's going to argue that. To be the best-selling author of all time and to impersonate God for that long and that convincingly is something that someone if it was written by a man of a great intelligence or a convention of people. Let's say we were able to convince the people that there was natural revelation. So it didn't happen. We were able to convince them. Would we go out and say and expose ourselves and say, if this ever happens again, we're disproven? We open the door for our ouster, so to speak. It could be ousted as a hoax when we ourselves know that it could be made up because we made it up ourselves. Think about this, guys. If we made it up ourselves, we know it can be made up. How then would we write in Deuteronomy that no one will ever claim that this will happen? No one will be able to make it up. Wait a minute, if you made it up, someone else will make it up as well.
Yeah, I don't see that it says it will ever happen in the future.
What does it say? What do you have there?
Whenever a people hear the voice of God speaking out of the midst of fire, as thou hast heard and read.
Well, read the verse prior to that, 32.
For ask now of the days past, which were before thee, since the day that God created man upon the earth, and from the one end of the heaven unto the other, whether there hath been any such thing as this great thing is, or hath been heard.
Asked
like
from one end of the world to the other end of the world, since the beginning of time, has this ever happened? That's the question. Has it ever happened? We're asking.
That's talking about the past, isn't it?
It's telling us. Asked. Read what it says. Ask. Has it ever happened? 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 Ask the question.
But wasn't one of your points that it will, in the future, it will never happen?
Well, I'm saying whenever you read this, the point is that whenever you read this, at whatever point in time in all of human history, whenever you have the copy of the book, you can ask, has it ever happened? In all of human history besides for that. Now we're 3,300 years ago, we have to ask the question. And in 100 years, let's ask the question again. Every time you read the book, it says, ask, it will never happen. Has it ever happened?
It's present every time you read it.
That's right. That's the point.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think.
So the point is like this. If it didn't happen, if it's not true, it was made up. If it was made up, it could be replicated. If it could be replicated, it would have been replicated.
It's not
Arguably. Exactly. And if the human author invented this situation and made people believe it, they themselves know that it could be falsified. They would never include that in the book as a prediction. The fact that it only happened once, it's true. We don't have no record of any such natural revelation. It's never happened. That a nation has experienced prophecy and survived. It's never happened. It's never been claimed to have happened. Only us. And the Torah is going out on a limb saying, you know what? Verses 32 and 33. Go ask, has it ever happened? If it did happen, close the book. We can move on.
Right, but you're saying that he wasn't just talking to the people there.
No.
To all the people.
Yes. We're reading the Torah. God's telling us. Go ask.
That's true. There's another verse earlier, correct me if I'm wrong, where it says, I'm speaking to y'all not just here
To you,
today,
but to your generations,
those
future generations.
time.
Right. That's beginning of Deuteronomy.
Now, is there historical evidence in Egypt about the plague?
So you're jumping way to the end of the discussion. I have a whole part of it. No, let's do it. So you want to know if there's any
Egyptian records.
Yeah, you get
let's see here. You want to know if there's any Egyptian records of like what kind of records? Do you want hieroglyphics? What do you want? You want cuneiform?
Records of what? Slavery?
No.
Okay, it's like this.
Oh, the plague.
Okay.
Moses existed,
Okay, this is a common question. Okay, where's all the archaeology? I have this in the 5th class. This is all the first class where we come. 5th class of this discussion. That's okay. Because you asked it, Bernie, and because I love you a lot, and because you were the one who prompted us to have this discussion, we'll address it. You want to know, where is all the evidence? Where is the physical evidence?
2, 3, 4.
Skip it all. Let's go all to the
Read
end.
the others first. I can't talk about
We
it.
need the Egyptian server.
Let's see.
It's like we need Hillary's server, you know.
Good luck with that.
Yeah.
So your question.
First, you need to have a man that's got a fact.
She's not quite as
So like this. Do we know, Bernie, the first modern historian, Herodotus, 2,500 years ago, the idea that we have today of preserving history impartially, right, without being biased, without giving that's a relatively new idea. It didn't exist before Herodotus. So just the idea of a nation broadcasting their own demise is unheard of. We have examples, like we have Sancherib in the British Museum in London. They have Sancherib, who was the Assyrian, the king of Assyria, and he was the one who destroyed the northern kingdom of Israel about 2,600 years ago. We have some extant pottery shards or something like that. Sancherib and I vanquished the entire people. And then we have him claiming that I have surrounded Jerusalem and I'm about to attack. Right? We have no record of his ultimate demise, because people didn't go out of the way to broadcast their own misfortune. History was written by the victor, right? And now, here's a great, and also archaeology. Remember, lack of evidence is not evidence of lack, and we do have some good stuff. But the idea of physical remains is always it's always up to interpretation. So you have some people like the Bible maximalists who take all the archaeology of the Bible as being more proof versus the minimalists who say it's less proof. This is not a subject that we could. There's a huge debate on this issue. But to think that the Egyptians would keep records and highlight the fact that the small nation that they had subjugated had embarrassed them in such a degree is unheard of. We have no record in any ancient civilizations where they're humbled to such a degree where they write that in official documentation. Yes. So don't expect to find any prominent attention to Moses' humiliation of Pharaoh, even if it did happen. That being said, we have found something. We have found some things. For example, the Ipuwer papyrus. Now, I'm not an expert in archaeology, but we did find something, the papyrus called the Ipuwer, Ipuwer, which is historical to that time. And it does say there's blood everywhere, famous line. So there are those that want to interpret that that's a reference to blood, the plague of blood. And it is historic to that time. Whether or not it's a reference to that or not, it's a huge debate. Google Ipuwer papyrus. As to that, we have the Brooklyn papyrus. By the way, these papyruses are called after where they're. It's not like there was a city in Egypt called Brooklyn. It's housed in the Museum of Brooklyn. It's called the Brooklyn papyrus, which talks about the names. So the names of Yisachar, Asher, Shifra. These are names that are found on lists in these papyruses that are historic to that time. Point being is that we have some corroborating archaeological evidence. There is no anachronisms. We have no counter evidence. We don't have a lot. There isn't a lot. We have, for example, the sale of Joseph to the Midianites for the amount that it costed was accurate to that time. So yes, there are some kind of corroborating or maybe circumstantial evidence pointing to the accuracy or from the archaeology. There isn't a lot. It on itself, would I say it's enough to prove the entire Torah? I wouldn't rely on that. Is there anything counter evidence? There's not a single bit of counter evidence. There's no anachronisms. Like we said, and the guy found that, if the Torah was written 1,000 years later, the prices of things would be very different. How much does a haircut cost for men, not for women? What do you pay, Steve, for a haircut? $17. I know you got a nice little mass of hair there. What do you pay?
I go to a place in Westbury for $16. I've been going to the same place for $15.
So there you go. $16, 12. Bernie, admittedly, you have a simpler haircut than Steve does.
It was 13 up until about.
Oh wait, mine just went up to 13.
There you go. Okay, so that's what we pay. If I wrote a book about
9 in New Jersey.
If I wrote a book, a historical book, in 2015 that I got a haircut for 25 cents.
When I was a kid?
That's right. So within 50 years, the price of a haircut goes from 25 cents to $10, $15, $20, something like that. So it's in such a short amount of time, the prices changed so dramatically, the inflation there. The fact that Joseph was sold for 20 silver pieces, the Torah tells us how much he was sold for. And the fact that we have found documents detailing prices of slaves to that time, that 20 silver pieces was right in line with the prices, that's remarkable. In 50 years, prices of items could change by hundreds and hundreds and thousands of percentage points. So yes, go ahead.
Silver, because that was you ever have inflation because of the paper money. Probably
Still okay,
the price of a slave wouldn't change for hundreds of years. Silver is silver.
Well, maybe
getting into abstract economics.
Yeah. You're sure from the year
we need John Ruskin for precious metals.
1,400 years before the Common Era, the prices would have changed. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe. Either way, we have no anachronisms. We have nothing. The name Ramses. The Torah talks about Ramses. We know now that Ramses was the emperor at that time. We know that. So could Ezra have known that? Maybe. I don't know. Did he have access to? Did someone else write it and they had access? Maybe they just guessed right everywhere they did. Who knows? My point is, it's not enough evidence to support it, or it's not enough evidence to prove the Torah. There's certainly nothing that counterproves the Torah. There is some nice corroborating or just circumstantial evidence that that does work really nicely. Either way, we look at this verse, and I think you have to ask yourself the question: if it was made up, by men, and they invented the whole national revelation story, first of all, that in itself is a dramatic feat. How do you convince people that they experience prophecy? Especially those same people that it's all recorded. The book is recorded twice in Exodus and Deuteronomy. It's repeated because it's very important. And God tells you, listen, you saw it. It's very clear. We all watch the movie instead of reading the book. In the movie, Moses gets the Ten Commandments, and the people are worshiping the golden calf. In the book, read the book. The entire nation sees, the entire nation hears. Read Exodus chapter 20, where it talks about it the first time. Deuteronomy chapter 4 and chapter 10, wherever it talks about it there in Deuteronomy. I believe it's chapter 4. It makes it abundantly clear, repeats it again and again. Don't think that it was just Moses. It was the entire nation that experienced prophecy. How could you convince someone that they accepted that they experienced that? If they didn't, we would never know. But what we do know is that the Torah goes out on a limb that says that it will never be claimed to have happened again. Thus, if it was made up, it had to be made up in such a way. If it was made up, no one in their right frame of mind would think that it could not be replicated. Go ahead.
What about they were able to, they wanted to create this conspiracy so that other nations would fear them?
Yeah, there's a lot of motivations why you would do that. I'm saying I can think of a lot of different motivations. But would you put so many potential pieces of information that would disprove you?
You wouldn't do things that were restricted either.
Yeah, why would you do things that seem to be counterintuitive? Why would you do that? But why would you say that this can't be done again? If the experience happens once, it can happen again. And the Torah is telling us for all of time. You look back, ask the question: did it ever claim to have happened? Now we're 3,300 years after this all allegedly happened, and it has never been claimed to have happened again. Something that could, if it was made up once, it could very well have been made up again. Clearly, anyone of reasonable intelligence could reach that same conclusion.
Like
Yeah, go ahead.
people are claiming to be the Jesus, and then they follow them, and then it goes down, and then another ones come up and say, I'm the one. And
Yeah, this is also very important. The fact that if the Torah is true, this is a nice punctuation of the discussion. If the Torah is true or was true, it still is true. Means what the Christians, very interestingly, you say the Christians and the Muslims, they consider themselves to be the natural heirs, or they're the continuation of the Jewish replacement. Exactly, they replaced us. Interestingly, they made a very calculated decision not to question the legitimacy of the Torah. No one of the Christians and Muslims question the legitimacy of the Torah.
But don't the Muslims in saying that Abraham took
Ishmael? Yeah, so they didn't do a great job of actually reading it. But they don't claim that the Jewish people never had the. Yes, of course, they made some silly mistakes. And lots of mistakes. Like, for example, Haman is put in the same generation as Pharaoh, when we know they lived hundreds and hundreds of years away from each other, apart from each other. There's many, many, many very simple mistakes like that in the Quran. Just basic mistakes. And then Christianity also has lots of just simple errors and simple contradictions. Like who is the ancestry of, or maybe it just was written by man. The ancestry of Jesus. How did Jesus descend? In Matthew and Luke, I think. Yeah. Matthew and John, I don't remember. It starts off like, just how does Jesus descend from King David? One path, another path. Just different names, different people.
And they have an explanation which I don't understand.
But they don't question.
Yeah, well, that's the whole point. The lineage is different in one book.
Yes,
but there's some sort of explanation which I don't want to disrespect anybody's faith, but it sounds like gobbledygook to me.
You're just not a genealogist.
Or you just don't believe in accepting things upon faith.
Well,
faith alone.
Faith alone.
So in conclusion, this is but some of the overwhelming evidences that we have to the accuracy of the Torah, these miracles and revelations that were recorded in the Torah, lived to be very people that experienced them, and once in all of human history have ever been claimed to have happened, and not only that, are predicted will never happen again. Now, the Muslims, the Christians were very clever in their rejection of Judaism. They decided to not reject the accuracy of the Torah, because the Torah is so incontrovertible that they were smart by saying, you know what, let's assume it was true. Oh, we're not questioning that. We're just saying it was replaced. Problem with that is the multiple times that the Torah itself says, actually, this is the final book. And this will never be replaced. And do not subtract any mitzvahs from the Torah. It says it multiple times in Deuteronomy chapter 4, chapter.
It says not to change a jot or a tittle.
Nothing. Don't change anything.
It says jot or tittle? It does
Pretty
say.
sure it says jot.
I thought that was Churchill.
That's New Testament.
Is that New Testament?
Jot or the
So that's that.
The yud and the something else.
Churchill stole it from the New Testament.
I have 4 more entire classes on going through some of the more predictions of the Torah. Now, many predictions of the Torah came true and answered a lot of the common questions that we have. Hopefully, we'll incorporate that into further classes. But I think this alone should at least give us pause, or at least encourage us to investigate the matter further. It's very important for us, even if we believe in Torah. It's important for us to have enough evidence to quelch and squelch and quell any naysayers. We have to know the Torah says, "Damash of course." You have to know how to respond to a skeptic. And also for us, this is building our faith profile. And we have a remarkable amount of information that the Torah tells us, and it's valid if the Torah is true. And that's inspiring also that we haven't been living a lie for thousands of years. It's based upon significant evidence that we could still today find no way for us to falsify it. Go ahead.
I was just thinking, I don't know every word in the Torah, but looking at the Hebrew, and all the Hebrew says, in God, well, some of it says, and God did this, and God said, and God took, and so took, like God's into it a whole lot. And God said to Moses, and then Moses said to the people. It's a lot of God.
Yeah. So
talking.
yeah, go ahead.
And then other people, and Isaac did this, and so did that.
Yeah. So the Jewish
God.
The Jewish claim is, I mentioned this
it.
at the beginning, is that the Torah was written by Moses. However, every single word of the Torah was dictated to him by God. So God tells Moses, write, and Moses said. That's Moses writes in the third person. Moses writes in first person. Doesn't say, God told me to write as so-and-so. But, and I said it. It's not written in first person because God was dictated to Moses what Moses ought to write. And as a prophet, Moses could write what happened before and also predictions of what happens afterwards. And we'll see that maybe in some future class. But either way, I think we have enough. And also, we should feel uncomfortable. I think if you feel uncomfortable with the evidence, that's a good thing. Because hopefully, if we're intellectually honest, we say, okay, it's true. What does it mean if it's true? What are the ramifications if it's true? And if it's not true, well, what are the ramifications of that? And if we're intellectually honest, we should pursue this discussion because it's very, very crucial and important for how we live our lives. That's that. Everyone, thank you for staying and listening.
Would you guys like, because we're building the curriculum, next do like maybe one on the same topic, like maybe all prophecy in there?
Well, there's more stuff. Predictions. I have 2 classes on predictions the Torah makes. Crazy predictions that no human with the right mind would make. Whatever, we'll do. Yeah, we can do another one. What do you? Sure. Fantastic. Everyone, thank you so much. Have a wonderful Sunday. And we'll see you next week.
So it's next 2 weeks we have